Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Sundial. Picking up from where I left off yesterday, just working on filling the creatures with a primer base color.
You see, is talk of the observer. This is what has invaded physics, the most rarefied and formal of all the sciences, had, in order to make sense of its enterprise, allow the observer a kind of primacy with the thing observed. As this seeps into the life sciences and psychology, hopefully the phobia of actually involving yourself in your field of study that informs all these reductionist to ratomorphic types in the schools of psychology will be overturned. Well, having flayed that dead horse sufficiently, another category of illusion that needs to be addressed, I think, is how would one call it? Well, basically philosophical illusion, or philosophical/religious illusion. This is the idea that by a direct appeal to intuition, we can somehow gain a foothold on truth. I think this is as specious as the notion that we can gain a foothold on truth through reason or experiment. This foothold on truth idea may have to be given up. I'm sure some of you have heard me recall the situation where Wittgenstein was raving about something, and one of his students said, "But is it the truth?" And he said, "Well, it's true enough." And this is really means a great divide has been crossed when you can say that, because it means you understand now that you are no longer a fairy in a Platonic super world, but that you are actually a monkey with a brain full of mush trying to sort out, what's right in front of you. True enough is what we should probably rest with. And, illusions abound. For instance, I was speaking of these religious ontologies. I was talking to someone recently who amazed me, because I've always thought of them as a person of great intelligence, but who would never be reclaimed from the arms of Mother Church. And we had dinner last week, and he said, "I realized it finally comes down to, do you believe the universe is being run by the ghost of a Galilean politician?" And he said, put that way, I realized that it wasn't. Other religious myths are less easily undone, I think. Monotheism has an appealing philosophical neatness, but it leads apparently to clitorectomy. So, you want to watch that. This search for philosophical neatness may make for strange bedfellows. And of course, Buddhism, I love the illusion of Buddhism. It's the illusion that illusion can be transcended. And again, not really doing genuflection to the animal nature. It's amazing to me. I mean, if you were to meet a termite who stated that his or her goal in life was the perfect modeling of the cosmos, you would think it was quite a comic undertaking. And yet, how different are we that we should presume to more than a shadow of the truth? Well, then, finally, or I don't know finally, but completing my laundry list here, a shadow of the truth. Well, then, finally, or I don't know finally, but completing my laundry list here, linguistic truth, or the truth of language and the illusions that language weaves, because someone quite intelligent said language was invented so that people could lie. In other words, it gives you that fudge factor of obfuscation where someone says, you know, why did you do that? Well, the best approach is, I didn't do that. You know, you thought I did that. What you thought you saw, you didn't see. In other words, I suppose that lawyers are probably the people who have done the finest work with language, and behind them politicians. And the true potential for language to elevate and to unite the community was early on betrayed into the production of illusory ideological goods, which could then be marketed among the people and to spread confusion. Psychedelics reflect on this because psychedelics stretch and pull and melt and recast the illusion-producing machinery of language. I mean, I think that if you had to say the one thing that psychedelics do for everyone, whether they have a good trip or a bad trip, because it's up to them to interpret what they make of this, is it shows you the relativity of your cultural viewpoint. You know, that it's just your point of view. You inherited it from a geographical area, a culture, a set of parents. It has no relationship whatsoever to anything anchored in some kind of metaphysical superspace. It's just your cultural point of view. And travel actually does the same thing, and I've always felt there was a weird affinity between psychedelics and travel, and I suppose many people have, or we wouldn't call it a trip, and we wouldn't call it a journey. But travel shows you the relativity of culture, and what's really happening when you travel, you see, is you're moving from one language domain to another. We don't think of it that way, but that is in fact what is happening. You can never see the Amazon jungle if you keep intact the bubble of linguistic assumptions of the place you started out from. Every place will withhold its secrets from you. I learned this in the Amazon because the first time I went, I had virtually no botany. And to me, the jungle was green. That's what it was. And it was many shades of green, and it was beautiful, and it was this and that, but it was basically green. The second time I went, I was with a lot of botanists. And within days, you learn the families. That's how they do it. With the same taxonomy I'm here applying to illusion was really developed to describe plants and animals. So you learn the families, the plants with square stems, the plants with the opposed leaves, the plants with the particular flower structure. Once you know families, then you have a linguistic wedge in. But the corrupting or curious thing about language is that, like all tools, it shapes its user in ways that are not suspected until it's too late. So, for instance, the way in which Western civilization is totally obsessed with the subject-object relationship. It's the basis of our science, our polity, our relations to commerce, the concept of product, all of these things come out of the subject-object relationship, which is an aspect of language. So I point all this out because in talking about my new book, somebody said that I had gone too far. And I was amused because it implied, from what? You know? It's not like there is a King's X where graybeards in white coats tend the sacred vestal fires of reality. There is no reality. There are only people who know this and people who don't know this and are therefore being manipulated by the people who do know it. This is true, or true enough. And, one of the things that has amazed me with my own personal career, because, I started out basically shoveling snow in a cow town in Colorado, and by fate or who knows what, come to the present position. And what I notice as I traverse levels on a supposed ladder of success, where you would expect there to be more and more competition and people and activity, actually it gets emptier and emptier. There is nobody minding the store, as far as I can tell. This is why I'm so unsympathetic to conspiracy theory. We could use a few conspiracies. Nobody is minding the store. Everybody is getting rich, personally rich. And so they don't have time for, to advance the Aryan race or the Council of Zion or any of this fantasy and illusion that haunts the world of conspiracy theory. Rather, it seems everything is being left pretty much to develop on its own because people are afraid to grab or touch the levers and buttons in the control room of the historical vehicle. And what that means then is that people who can cut through these many, many illusions, the illusion of materialism, the illusion of business as usual, the illusion of benevolent institutions carefully guiding us toward reasonable destinies. If you cut through all that, if you disabuse yourself of all that, you will empower yourself to eventually be able to stand up in delicate social and political situations and just say, bullshit. That's bullshit. And this is worth considering doing simply because we have an imperiled planet on our hands. We have been, for a long, long time, the victims of illusion. Western civilization, Stephen Dedalus was right. History is a nightmare from which one must awaken. Quite literally. I mean, we have been blind to what we have been doing. We are blind at this moment to what we are doing. If in a single moment the actual nature of our predicament were to fully make itself felt in the mind of any one of us, I think it would be paralyzing. It would be horrifying. We have waited till the last moment of the last hour. The house is burning down around us, and we rouse ourselves from the stupor of materialism, the stupor of Christianity and scientism, the stupor of male dominance, sexism, and racism, if we don't rouse ourselves from this stupor, the momentum toward extinction is now practically irreversible. If we don't rouse ourselves from this stupor, the momentum toward extinction is now practically irreversible. You know, the Grateful Dead like to sing that song, "We need a miracle every day." We certainly do. Because and so then that brings me back to my original point that the moment that outside the then of culture lies an unmapped terra incognita, as vast as the New World was to the old in the 15th century, as vast as outer space appears to us now. The new world outside of culture is a world that can be conquered through vision and language. And, you know, many of you have sat through my recitations of what it's like to smoke DMT. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the medieval woodcut of the guy sticking his head through the cogs and wheels of the cosmic machinery to observe a new world outside. The message here is, and it's more than a message. It's a message if you just come to events like this and then go back to studying cost accounting. It's an experience, if you will, but avail yourselves of these tools. The experiences of the discovery of a new world as real as any world that we know. It's not going to come from Time magazine or the Secretary General of the United Nations or anybody like that. It isn't that the world is tired and played out and that all frontiers have been explored. Every culture could support that viewpoint within certain classes and in certain situations. But in fact, it has never been true, and it isn't true now. We are monkeys, and monkeys love a hell of a good fight. And we have a hell of a fight bearing down on us because we have to clean up the mess. We're not going to go silently into the gentle night of extinction. It's just not going to happen that way. Creativity is going to be unleashed. Struggle is going to be an unavoidable part of trying to steer this battleship away from the cataracts of history in which we are now caught. I believe that there is a tremendous obligation upon the privileged classes of the high-tech industrial democracies, and I dare say that includes everyone in this room, a tremendous obligation to attempt to deconstruct the bomb that we have inherited. And that is literally our situation. The gift from the past, from the 19th century, from the 1940s, from the psychology of Nixon and Johnson and that kind, is a ticking bomb, except that it's a planet. And it's the greatest challenge to intelligence that intelligence has ever faced. And yet it's precisely the kind of challenge that intelligence should be able to meet. Because what it requires is large-scale strategic planning, implementation of visionary responses. It is not incremental. It's sudden, complete, and dramatic. And I really believe that there will only be one chance. You know, we are circling the runway of post-history, and the engines are running low, and there is one approach, and then, you know, if you miss that approach, you're into the drink. Now, we can use we have the great good fortune to be approaching the end of a millennium. Would it be redundant to say this only happens once in 1,000 years? Yes. And it's extraordinarily fortunate. Once I was in England and I ran into somebody I hadn't seen for 20 years. And I was amazed, and I said to Rupert, how often does one get a chance to meet someone one hasn't seen for 20 years? And he said, well, I dare say, I suppose every 20 years or so. We can use the millennium, this apparent coincidence of our dilemma and a calendrical turning point, to create awareness of opportunity. And we can use the psychedelics to dissolve boundaries between ourselves and other people, between institutions that govern and the governed. And basically, we have to insist on the seriousness of the situation and the potential for solutions. And what it means is a much more radical break with American society than we've been willing to contemplate in the last 20 years. We went through this thing with, the two-term governor of Arkansas, and it took 1.5 years to play that all out and to see what it comes to. And what it comes to is, Washington is convulsed over the possibility of closing an air base near Sacramento. So how can we even conceive of this government making an impact on the real problems? It is still government by flim-flam. And that would be all very well if we had 500 years to dig ourselves out of this dilemma. But if a radical political alternative is not opened up in this country, then we are essentially, I think, going to amuse and entertain ourselves into extinction. The ordinary orthodox system has failed. What Bill Clinton exists to prove, at best, is that people of goodwill make no difference in those institutions because they are compromised and corrupted from the very beginning. It's just the way it is. Those institutions are set up for business as usual. Business as usual at this point is a death sentence on the human race. What has to be done is a tribalizing of culture, an ecstaticizing of culture, a dissolving of hierarchy. That means self-empowerment through claiming the new information technologies, through deconditioning from propaganda, through deconditioning from the pharmaphobia that holds everyone within the pre-programmed molds that are being handed down from Madison Avenue in Hollywood. It means actually realizing that your life is your own. Your destiny is your own. It isn't within the confines of the culture, because the culture is dissolving. And to the degree that the word is put out, that phenomenon will accelerate. We are in an extraordinary transition. Everything that has worked now doesn't, meaning global economic systems, control of the spread of epidemic disease, and so forth and so on. All these systems are breaking down, and yet the new systems are not yet in place. So this is a situation of extraordinary malleability and a situation in which people of great vision and great ego can make tremendous impact. So it's a very dangerous situation. We saw this in the 1930s in Germany and in Europe, where there were all kinds of potentials all kinds of possibilities. We forget how powerful a visionary Marxism was before the rise of fascism. Movements like Bauhaus and Dada and Surrealism all had agendas which disappeared then under the rise of fascism. All kinds of possibilities. We forget how powerful a visionary Marxism was before the rise of fascism. Movements like Bauhaus and Dada and Surrealism all had agendas which disappeared then under the rise of fascism. This must not happen again. And what it has to do with is resisting images that are coming from the reality studio, resisting the images that are coming off the tube, coming through the newspapers, and creating a community based on psychedelics, sexuality, sensitivity, and good sense.
All right. So the couple of minutes left, actually, I might be able to throw it in here.
In this situation is the preservation of the earth, the preservation of diversity, deconditioning from product fetishism, deconditioning from energy overconsumption. All these things we understand, but we seem to lack the power to change our minds, or if we have that power, then the power to change other people's minds. And I am into psychedelics, not because I think it's a sure thing, but because I think it is the only game in town. In other words, it's the only thing I've ever seen change an individual on a time scale similar to the time scale that we have if we're going to make a difference. I've seen over and over again, I'm sure many of you have, people go into a psychedelic jerks and come out halfway decent human beings, 8 hours later. If we had 500 years to steer global society into safe harbor, it might be possible to do that, but we don't. I mean, I really believe...
All right, 47 seconds left. That's it on this clip, so thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Ranch in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Sundial. Still a long ways to go on this one, but that gets a few more characters blocked in, one step at a time. Have a good day, guys.
It looks like we're